After 40, wealth is no longer a racetrack, it is a minefield. That is the truth. Nobody wants to tell you because it offends the modern ego. People want to hear that the answer is still the same at 45 as it was at 25. Take risks, swing big, chase upside, find the next explosive opportunity, be aggressive, stay hungry, stay fully exposed. Keep pressing that language, flatters youth, because youth can survive stupidity better than maturity can. But arithmetic does not flatter you after 40. Arithmetic stops negotiating. When you are 25 and you lose 40% of your capital, the damage is real, but time is still standing behind you like a giant reserve army. You may have 40 years of work ahead of you. 40 years of compounding, 40 years of additional income, 40 years of new mistakes, new recoveries, new opportunities, new cycles, new energy that does not make the loss pleasant, but it makes the battlefield forgiving. After 40, forgiveness becomes expensive. Lose 40% at 50, and you do not need 40% to recover. You need about 67%. Lose 50%, and you do not need 50%. You need 100%. Double your money just to get back to zero. That is not pessimism. That is not fear. That is not a market opinion. It is simple arithmetic, and arithmetic does not care that you are still ambitious, still smart, still capable, or still convinced that this time is different. That is why I say the game changes after 40. Not because opportunity disappears, because error compounds differently. At 25, a stupid mistake can be a bruise. At 50, the same mistake can be an amputation. You need to understand that sentence so deeply that it changes your posture, because most financial failure after 40 does not come from the absence of opportunity. It comes from walking into the minefield with the swagger of youth and the time horizon of a middle-aged adult. That combination destroys people. The financial industry hates this framing because it makes excitement look juvenile. It makes product pushing look irresponsible. It makes the search for brilliance look less important than the avoidance of stupidity. But I have spent my life around capital, and the truth is brutally simple. Most fortunes are not destroyed because people failed to find extraordinary opportunities. They are destroyed because people stepped on ordinary mines, borrowed money, overspending, panic, ego, denial. Playing games outside their circle, quitting learning, breaking trust, those are the mines. And after 40, the objective is not to dance beautifully through them, it is to stop stepping on them. That is what most people miss. They think getting rich later in life requires something dramatic. It usually requires something much less glamorous. Fewer fatal mistakes, better sequencing, more patience. Less ego, more cash, more discipline, more respect for the simple math of survival. I learned long ago that a man who avoids enough disasters can look like a genius to the crowd, not because he is brilliant, because the crowd keeps blowing itself up and calling it ambition. So let me start with the first mine, because it is the one that seduces intelligent people more than almost any other: borrowed money. If you want to go broke in a sophisticated way, borrow to invest, mortgage your house to buy stocks, take margin because the spread looks attractive, use leverage because the numbers look easy in a rising market. Tell yourself it is only a small amount, only temporary, only prudent, only tactical, only until the next move works. That is how thoughtful people walk into ruin. I have said for a long time that intelligent men go broke in three ways: liquor, ladies, and leverage. The last one is the most interesting because it allows people to feel smart while they are destroying themselves. Leverage flatters the mind. It makes mediocre upside feel extraordinary. It turns modest gains into exciting ones. It makes the future arrive faster. That is why weak people love it. It lets impatience cosplay as intelligence. But leverage is not just a return enhancer. It is a mind multiplier. Every asset class has uncertainty: stocks, property, businesses, private deals, all of it. Without leverage, uncertainty can wound you. With leverage, uncertainty can erase you. And after 40, erasure matters more than underperformance. Underperformance is irritating. Erasure is terminal. If you are 25 and blow up, you may still rebuild. If you are 55 and blow up, you are not losing a position, you are losing runway. That is why after 40, the first commandment is simple: stay alive, not spiritually. Financially, the game is no longer about looking clever this quarter. It is about surviving long enough for compounding to become your employee instead of your distant theory. Borrowed money threatens survival, which is why I distrust it so deeply in maturity. There are always elegant arguments in favor of leverage. There are always models. There are always people who explain why the risk is modest, the spread attractive, the downside manageable, the edge obvious. Fine, but any wonderful number multiplied by 0 is still 0. If your structure allows one catastrophic outcome, that possibility must be respected more than 1,000 pretty scenarios. Older people especially need to hear this. The danger is not only that leverage increases volatility. The danger is that it can force movement when stillness would have saved you. Margin calls do not care about your conviction. Loan terms do not care about your long-term thesis. Lenders do not care that the market should come back. Forced selling is where intelligent narratives go to die. You do not need more force after 40. You need fewer ways to be forced. That is why I would rather see you slightly slower and alive than faster and structurally fragile. The second mine is much more ordinary and therefore much more common, spending slightly more than you earn, not dramatically more. That would be too obvious, just a little more. A few hundred here, some convenience there, a slightly nicer version of life because you are tired and tell yourself you deserve it. A little bit of creep each year until your expenses rise to greet every raise like a predator meeting prey. This mine kills quietly because it does not feel dramatic. It feels civilized, it feels normal, it feels like adulthood, better house, better car, better trips, better schools, better dining, better shopping, better subscriptions, better everything. Then 20 years pass. One person has options, the other has chains. That is the whole difference. Spending less than you earn is not a moral slogan. It is the first law of freedom. The person who lives slightly below his means and captures the difference for reserves, investment. And optionality lives in a completely different universe from the one who lives slightly above his means and finances the gap with optimism. At first, the difference is invisible. That is why people underestimate it. Both people may live in the same neighborhood, work in similar offices, and drive similarly respectable cars. But beneath the surface, one is reinforcing the bridge and the other is quietly sawing through it. Every dollar above your means is a future claim against your freedom. Every dollar below your means is a future vote for your independence. This is especially vicious after 40, because your obligations are usually heavier by then. Maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have children, maybe you have parents beginning to need help. Maybe you are carrying the whole family income, maybe your body no longer tolerates stress the way it once did. All of this means that spending slightly more than you earn is not simply inefficient. It is an assault on your future room to maneuver. The public thinks wealth is a high income. Number wealth is the distance between what your life costs and what your capital can eventually cover. If your lifestyle rises every time your earnings do, you remain a servant no matter how fine the salary looks on paper. I have seen people earning large sums live in permanent anxiety because every extra dollar was already spoken for before it arrived. Bigger house, better car, more status, more tuition, more maintenance, more recurring pressure. They were not rich, they were well-dressed prisoners. And that leads to the third mine, unreliability. This one looks unrelated to wealth until life becomes serious enough for invisible networks to matter. After 40, money does not only come through obvious wages. Opportunity travels through trust, promotions, recommendations, partnerships, introductions, private deals. Someone remembering that you delivered when you said you would deliver, someone trusting you with a seat at a table because your name lowers anxiety rather than raising it. Reliability sounds dull, and that is why shallow people ignore it. But after 40, trust is capital. If you repeatedly miss deadlines, break promises, arrive late, change character depending on pressure, or become erratic under stress, you are not just being flawed, you are burning long-term wealth pathways you cannot even see. Money often moves through quiet confidence. Who do people call when an attractive private deal needs a partner? Who gets the role when a business needs a steady operator? Who gets referred when there is a chance to acquire, consult, advise, join, buy in, or lead? Usually not the most dramatic person in the room, usually the most dependable. That is why reliability is not just a virtue, it is a compounding advantage in youth. You can sometimes outrun unreliability with raw talent. After 40, patterns harden, reputations spread, and every broken promise burns longer. If you are the kind of person who keeps your word, people eventually route opportunity toward you. If you are the kind of person who keeps improvising and excusing, people eventually route around you. And yes, that is wealth advice. The next mine is more subtle and perhaps even more fatal. Stopping learning. The world does not care how valuable you were at 32. It cares what remains valuable at 47, 52, 58. Industries change. Tools change. Business models change. Distribution changes. Skills lose pricing power. Markets reward different behaviors. If you stop learning, Your value can decay while your ego continues quoting old victories. That is one of the ugliest forms of self-destruction because the decline is quiet. At first, you are merely a little behind. Then younger people with less experience start getting the best opportunities. Then you feel offended. Then you call the system unfair. But often what really happened is simple. You stopped learning while the market kept moving. I have never known a truly wise person who did not read constantly. Not one. The successful older people I respect are learning machines. They do not merely collect experience. They update. They sharpen. They widen their understanding slowly and deliberately. They do not assume that intelligence in one decade guarantees relevance in the next. They keep feeding the mind the way serious investors keep feeding productive capital. That matters enormously after 40 because you still have time, but not infinite time. 20 years of continued learning can completely change your trajectory by 60. 20 years of intellectual stagnation can quietly lock you into decline. The gap becomes enormous precisely because it compounds slowly. People think they need a great opportunity. Very often they need a better decade of reading, which leads directly into the fifth mind, emotional decision. Making intelligence is overrated when it is not married to temperament. I have known brilliant people who could solve complex problems and still destroy themselves financially because they had the emotional discipline of children. Panic when markets fall, greed when they rise, euphoria when a trade works, self-pity when a deal fails, denial when risk becomes obvious, elaborate rationalizations to justify doing what they already emotionally wanted to do. That is not rationality. That is educated self-harm. The mind is astonishingly good at building arguments for appetites it does not wish to examine. That is why intelligent people often make more expensive mistakes than average people. The average person may make a stupid mistake out in the open. The intelligent person builds a cathedral of logic around his stupidity and then moves a large amount of money into it. After 40, that is deadly. You cannot afford emotional governance at this age. The consequences last longer. The recovery window is shorter. The humiliation is more expensive. A bad temperament can turn a decent portfolio into a crater, even if the owner is smart. That is why I say temperament matters more than IQ, patience, humility, calm. And emotional control are worth more than raw brilliance once real money and finite time enter the room. And there are psychological traps inside this minefield that specifically attack people after 40. The first is comfort. By then you have built a life, a routine, a circle, a role. The furniture of existence begins to feel fixed. Your mind starts protecting familiarity as if familiarity itself were wisdom. That is how people stay in stagnant jobs, dead industries, weak business models, and mediocre structures. Far too long, they confuse the known with the safe. It is not always safe. Sometimes it is just familiar decay. Comfort is dangerous because it numbs ambition without admitting it. You tell yourself things are fine. You tell yourself now is not the time. You tell yourself change can wait. Then 5 years disappear. Comfort is not only a cushion, it can be a cage. The second trap is the belief that it is too late. This one is poison because it masquerades as realism. A person looks at the gap between where he is and where he hoped to be and freezes. He tells himself the prime years are gone, the big chance passed, the distance is too great, the ideal outcome is unreachable. So he does nothing, which is the one decision guaranteed to produce the worst outcome. Starting late is not ideal. Starting never is fatal. That is why after 40, you must stop asking whether you can still reach the perfect scenario. Ask a more adult question. Can you still move away from the worst scenario? Usually the answer is yes, and yes matters more than ideal. If you are 45 and save $2,000 a month for 20 years at a modest 7%, you can arrive at 65 with roughly $1 million. Start at 50, and the exact same effort over 15 years may land around $630,000. Start at 55, and it may be around $340,000. None of those numbers are zero. None of those numbers are worthless. The person who says too late and does nothing guarantees a future that is weaker than the one still available. The third trap is self-pity. This is perhaps the ugliest because it feels justified. You have had losses, so has everyone. Bad luck, wrong timing, weak markets, betrayals, a divorce, a health event, a failed deal, a wrong turn. These things happen, but the moment you begin to see yourself as a special victim rather than as a participant who must still respond well, you leave the game psychologically. You become a commentator on your own decline. Self-pity destroys action, and after 40, inaction is one of the most expensive luxuries a person can buy. Now let me introduce a mental tool that matters more than almost any stock recommendation. Invert the problem. Instead of asking, how do I get rich after 40? Ask, how do I make sure I stay poor after 40? The answer is wonderfully clarifying. Use borrowed money to invest, spend a little more than you earn every year. Break trust, stop learning. Let emotions dictate major decisions. Hide from uncomfortable truths. Step outside your circle because your ego needs stimulation. Refuse to examine your patterns. That list will reliably wreck most people, which means its opposite is powerful. Avoid leverage, spend less than you earn, become reliable, keep learning, control your emotions, confront denial, stay within the circle of competence, review your mistakes with humility. It sounds almost offensive in its simplicity, but I do not care. Simple is what survives. That brings me to one of the most important ideas in all of investing and in all of adult life. The circle of competence, we all have one inside it, are the things you truly understand through repeated experience, not casual exposure. Outside it is a vast ocean of things you can talk about more easily than you can actually judge. The older you get, the more valuable this distinction becomes, because after 40, you cannot afford to keep paying tuition to your own vanity. A businessman who has run one industry well may suddenly believe he understands real estate speculation, public markets, private credit, venture deals, or crypto, because he succeeded somewhere else. That is how late life disasters begin. Experience in one area does not magically become competence in all areas. Wisdom means seeing the edge of your circle and respecting it. Arrogance means stepping outside it because you mistake confidence for understanding. The culture worships confidence. I worship boundaries. A clear boundary around what you do not know is one of the most profitable lines you can draw, especially after 40. Because every major error outside the circle costs more time to repair than you used to have, but the circle is not a prison. It can expand slowly with reading, repetition, and humility. That is the key. Expand it slowly. Do not leap outside it because somebody else sounds excited. And let me give you a tool almost nobody uses but nearly everyone needs. Keep a record of your stupid decisions. Some people jokingly call this a temple of shame. Fine. I do not care what you call it. What matters is that it exists. Write down the bad investment, the emotional sale, the denial phase, the leverage temptation, the moment you stepped outside your circle, the time you listened to excitement instead of evidence, the deal you forced because you were bored, the purchase you made to feel better, the relationship decision that had financial consequences you already knew were lurking. Write it down. Why? Because patterns do not disappear when ignored. They repeat. If you do not study your own errors, you will keep paying for them. Most people protect their self-image instead. They justify. They forget. They blame the market, the economy, their ex, their boss, the Fed, luck, timing, politics, anything except the repetitive pattern sitting inside their own decision, making machinery. That is denial. And denial is probably the greatest enemy of rational action after 40. Your savings are too low, but you promise to start next year. Your portfolio is too risky for your time horizon, but you call it aggressive. Your business is weakening, but you say the market will come back. Your spending is undisciplined, but you say life has been stressful. Your job is fragile, but you tell yourself loyalty will be rewarded. You know the truth, but your brain prefers comfort to clarity. The rational adult fights that instinct every day. Rationality is not merely being smart. It is making decisions from evidence rather than emotional need. It is changing your mind when facts change. It is seeking arguments against your own view before the market humiliates you. It is asking, what am I denying right now? This is why I say after 40, the objective is not to become brilliant. It is to become harder to fool, especially by yourself. And now we need to talk about what actually builds wealth in this stage of life. Because if I only tell you what not to do, you will mistake caution for paralysis. The first answer is boring. Get to your first serious capital threshold. The first $100,000 is brutal, slow, unglamorous. It does not feel like wealth while you are building it. And because it does not feel like wealth, most people sabotage the process. They expect compounding to feel magical at $10,000. It does not. 10% on $10,000 changes almost nothing in a person's emotional life. That is why early compounding feels invisible. But at $100,000, the machine begins whispering loud enough to be heard. Gains become meaningful, losses become consequential. The flywheel begins contributing to the push, which means if you start late, the answer is not more speculation. It is more aggression in saving, spending control, and income generation. You need to respect arithmetic, not gamble against it. That means cutting expenses harder than you want to, increasing income more intentionally than you planned, using the years you still have with much more seriousness than the culture encourages. That is not depressing, it is adult. The culture wants you chasing home runs. I want you building a position large enough that ordinary market returns actually matter. You only have to get rich once. You do not need 10 heroic wins. You need one structure strong enough to let time do what it has always done for disciplined people. And discipline after 40 is not just monthly investing. It is preparation, patience, and decisive action in the right sequence. Preparation means learning before urgency arrives. Reading, thinking, understanding, knowing your own numbers, knowing your circle, knowing which opportunities would actually fit you. Preparation is quiet, which is why weak people skip it. Patience means tolerating long stretches where the best decision is to do nothing visible. Most people hate this. They need movement to feel important. The market, the media, and their own ego all conspire to make stillness feel like failure. But the truth is that most of wealth building consists of boring periods where nothing obvious happens. You are saving, waiting, reading, observing, refusing to be lured into noise. That is not stagnation, that is strategic stillness. Then comes decisiveness. When the right opportunity appears, you cannot nibble like a frightened animal. You must be prepared enough, liquid enough, calm enough, and competent enough to act with conviction. That is the paradox. Most people either move constantly and stupidly or they freeze perpetually. Very few can combine patience and aggression. Very few can wait like a crocodile and then strike without emotional drama. When the right target passes close enough, that is one reason so many people remain ordinary investors forever. They either exhaust themselves with constant motion or they never move enough when the odds finally tilt. Wealth after 40 often belongs to the rare person who can do both. Sit still without anxiety and move decisively without hesitation. But preparation matters here too, because decisive action without preparation is just impulsiveness wearing expensive shoes. You must build a structure during the quiet years. Low debt, strong reserves, a clear circle, some cash, a mind that can think clearly under stress, an income structure that still produces surplus, trust that opens doors. These things look unrelated when viewed casually. They are not. They are the preconditions that allow later opportunity to matter. That is why the future is not closed after 40. It is simply less forgiving. Opportunities still come. Markets still cycle. Businesses still get mispriced. Promotions still appear. Partnerships still form. Industries still change. Capital still rewards rational patience. The question is not whether opportunity will exist. The question is whether you will be prepared when it arrives. And this is where I have to say something many people hate hearing. If you are struggling financially after 40, the outside world may not be the main reason. The economy matters, luck matters, timing matters, health matters, but most people's repeated financial pain is not random. It is patterned overspending, delay, denial, leverage temptation, emotional trades, ego outside the circle, weak learning habits, under-saving excuse. Making these patterns repeat until they are seen clearly enough to be broken. That is why self-awareness is wealth advice. If you do not know which mine you keep stepping on, you will call the explosions bad luck forever. So here is the system as plainly as I can give it to you. Build the first serious capital base, avoid leverage, spend less than you earn consistently and boringly, protect your reputation. Keep learning, stay inside your circle, maintain cash, question your own narratives, record your mistakes, wait without fidgeting, act without trembling when the right moment comes. That is it. No magic formula, no secret asset, no hidden guru passcode, just fewer stupid decisions, better structure, and enough time left for compound interest to stop feeling theoretical. And yes, there is one more truth. You do have less time than you used to. That is real. But you also have more time than your fear wants you to believe. At 45, 20 years is a long time. At 50, 15 years is not trivial. At 55, 10 years of disciplined action still beats the hell out of surrender. The person who says, "It is late, so I will start," has a future. The person who says, "It is late, so why bother," has already chosen one. I do not respect that choice. I respect the person who gets quieter, leaner, less stupid, more disciplined, more rational, and more dangerous with each passing year. Not because he is chasing brilliance, because he understands that after 40, the minefield does not reward flair. It rewards survivors who know where not to step and who still have the courage to advance. So tonight I want you to ask yourself one question, not how do I become brilliant? Ask, which mine do I keep stepping on? Borrowed money, overspending, denial, emotional decisions, unreliability, arrogance outside my circle, comfort that turned into a cage, the lie that it is too late, the indulgence of self-pity. Find the mine, mark it, and stop stepping on it. Because after 40, wealth is not mainly about extraordinary wins. It is about preserving what you build, compounding what you preserve, and refusing to let one stupid move erase years. You no longer want to donate to regret. That is the real game. And if you play it well, the future can still become much richer than the past. Not because you got lucky, because you stopped being careless in a place where carelessness had finally become too expensive.